Hi, welcome back to Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast. This is the show all about farmers markets. Whether you're a farmers market manager, a farmer, or a food producer selling at farmers markets, or just a curious farmers market shopper, this is the podcast for you. On today's episode of Tent Talk, our guest is Alli Ball, the creator of Retail Ready and founder of Alli Ball Consulting. Alli teaches classes and provides one-on-one consulting for small food businesses. On this episode, Alli shares her tips for breaking into the food retail scene, how food makers can find their voice of their brand, and how to have a rockin' display at the farmers market. Hi, I'm one of your hosts, Justine Marzoni-Mead, hot sauce maker and event facilitator for the Intense Conference.
Hi, I'm your co-host, Bridget Myers. I've spent years as an on-site farmers market manager, and I've done it all from pulling permits to social media marketing.
And I'm Kat Fields-White, Director of San Diego Markets, still an active farmers market manager, and founder of Intense Business.
Welcome back to Tent Talk. Today we're joined by Alli Ball of Retail Ready and Alli Ball Consulting. Alli works closely with food producers as an educator and consultant. She spent almost a decade working for the Bi-Rite family of businesses in San Francisco as a buyer, head of grocery, and store manager. Since then, Alli has successfully opened several retail locations, and she continues to work with a variety of clients ranging from farmers market food makers to nonprofits to James Beard nominated and award-winning chefs. Alli teaches food entrepreneur classes at La Cocina in San Francisco and volunteers as an advisor for both the Culinary Institute of America's Food Business School and Kitchen Table Advisors serving small farmers, and she also acts as the founding pantry chair for the Good Food Awards. Also, Alli will be speaking at the upcoming 2019 Intense Conference.
All right. Okay. Well, thanks so much, Alli, for being on our podcast with us today. We're so excited to talk to you. Let's just start with you telling us a little bit about your background and what led you to Bi-Rite, because I hear it's one of the coolest grocery stores ever.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you guys. Yeah. So I got into food in a pretty roundabout way. Before I started working at Bi-Rite Market, I worked for a team building and management development company here in the Bay Area in the tech industry. And before that, I actually worked for J. Crew, where I did merchandising for them. Yeah. So I left my tech job and I took a position at Bi-Rite where I could combine three things that I really loved, which was people management, merchandising, and of course a love of good food. So I think above all, Bi-Rite hired me for my people management skills. Mm-hmm. They were like, "Oh, we can teach you everything else. We can teach you ordering and receiving and all of those logistics behind the scenes. But if you've got the people management, that's really what we need in the food industry." So that's how I got started in food, which was a little bit different than most people who come into the industry.
Yeah. Can you just explain what Bi-Rite is, just for our listeners if they haven't heard of it?
Yeah. Bi-Rite's amazing. Bi-Rite is a family-owned grocery store. There's actually 2 locations now here in San Francisco. They've been in the same family since 1940. So, it's really incredible. The original location, still the original location is in the Mission District here in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And that was started by Sam's dad and his uncle, like I said, in 1940. And then we opened the second location, Bi-Rite Divisadero, which is about 3 miles away, in 2013.
Yeah, I used to live on Golden Gate and Divis right there. And Bi-Rite opened right as I was about to move away.
Oh, maybe I should stay.
I was a broke grad student, so I couldn't really afford to.
Couldn't stay.
Well, and that opening took us so much longer than anticipated. We were just held up in every single permitting process, and we opened years after we thought we would. So
what, a food-related brick and mortar took you forever because of permits in California?
Right?
No way.
In California, that never happens.
We hear that frequently. Well, that's so great though. So you've had 2 locations since 2000, or that store has had 2 locations since 2013.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They also have Bi-Rite Creamery, which is an ice cream shop, which is just wild. They're actually the #1 most Yelp reviewed business in America.
Wow,
really? As of a couple of years ago. So the creamery is just nuts. It's a big tourist attraction. And then they have 18 Reasons, which is a nonprofit branch of the business that's all about food education.
Wow, love
great.
it. What a nice, like, full-rounded business and a nice history. So when you were there as a retail buyer, where did you find new products? Did they come to you, or did you scout places like farmers markets?
Yeah, it's a great question. So that's back when Bi-Rite was teeny tiny. So I started there when Bi-Rite had 69 employees. I was employee number 69. And by the time I left, we had over 350 employees. So I just saw this like crazy growth in 5 years at Bi-Rite. So back then, like I said, the glory days of Bi-Rite, I was able to devote so much of my time for hunting for new products. So that meant farmers markets, absolutely, blogs and food publications online and offline. I had so many people pitching to me, dropping off samples day in and day out. And then I would also go to pop-up craft shows and holiday fairs and things like that, just finding that up-and-coming food business.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's a good recommendation to give to our farmers market vendors that for sure be there consistently at the farmers market, but look at other kinds of events that you can get involved in, makers fairs and that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. There's actually a really sweet story. So there's this wonderful woman, Daphne Corey of In a Jam up here in Emeryville. And so I first found her selling her jams on a card table at the corner of 18th and Valencia. I just happened to walk by and I was like, these jams are really good. Like, have you ever considered wholesaling? And this was right when she was, getting her business up and going. And so we brought her into Bi-Rite, and just yesterday she was awarded the best strawberry jam in America by Epicurious.
God.
Yeah.
Funny.
Yeah. 8 or 9 years later. It's a really sweet story. You never know when a buyer's out there trolling for new product.
That's what we always tell our vendors too. You never know when someone's going to come along, so
look great every week.
Yeah.
And it's totally true. And certainly when I was a buyer, I would never go to the farmer's market and announce that I was a buyer because, I wanted to stay on the DL. But I always had my eyes out for new product.
Yeah. So when you're walking through those trade shows or farmers markets or I guess the neighborhood and looking at people on the corner on card tables, what would make you stop and try something? What were there a few key things that you were looking for that stood out? Yeah.
That's a great question. Above all, I would say it's the vendor's personality. If they are there behind that table with a big smile and sparkly eyes and that engaged personality, I will absolutely stop by, even if it's something that I'm not interested in. Almost to a fault. I feel like my husband hates me for this, but I'm like, that person looks nice. We've got to go to their booth. So above all, it really is for me that personality behind the booth. And it seems so obvious, but I cannot tell you how often I see people on their phones or chatting with their coworker or chatting with the stall next to them.
Right.
Really ignoring those people who are potential shoppers. And so I always think about that, your number one role is to be that inviting presence behind your booth. And if you do that, that free thing for your business, you can really attract so many more shoppers.
So it kind of sounds like going back to what Bi-Rite thought. They wanted you because you had people skills. They could teach you merchandising. So vendors, you can learn to make jam, but you can't learn to be a people person.
Yeah. And, I say that all the time with my clients too. I'm like, if you don't like engaging with people, don't be the person at your farmer's market.
That's what we say
go
too.
Go hire somebody who has that great smile or that engaging personality. I mean, those are skills that are really hard to teach. And so I think that's one of the challenges of a business owner. You feel like you've got to do it all, but you'll get much higher sales if you find someone who actually likes selling.
Find those strengths for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to ask you a little bit about kind of not transitioning out of farmers markets, but for me, for example, I sell hot sauce and we sell at the farmers markets, but we also sell to small retailers. So how do you think that brands have to do brands have to represent themselves differently if they're selling at only farmers markets versus selling at farmers markets and also doing retail?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there's a lot of differences between farmers markets and retail. And the first thing is that engagement you have with your shoppers, right?
Yeah.
Like you have so much more of an opportunity to educate at the farmers market. And again, that's why you want that personality behind your table who's really eager to do that. I have one client who sells shrubs at a really famous farmers market here in San Francisco, and the shrubs just fly off the table. And that's because they can educate those passerbys on what a shrub is, how you would use it as a mixer, all of those different things. Those shoppers can taste through the shrubs. But on the retail shelf, that same product is really, really slow. It's slow to move off that shelf because, frankly, it requires a hand sell. It requires some sort of education. So I would say that's the biggest difference. If your product is something that really needs the story behind it to sell, that becomes much harder on the retail shelf. There are certainly things you can do to help it on the retail shelf, but it's harder. So that's one. The second thing is realizing that, again, at a farmer's market, you're on stage. It can be exhausting, but it can also be such a wonderful opportunity to connect with your potential fans. And you really don't have that in retail. So the biggest thing when you transition to that retail shelf is making sure that you have packaging that conveys your brand and your story in a really compelling way. Realizing that, you've got 3 seconds on the retail shelf to make a positive impression on a buyer. And that's pretty different than the farmer's market.
Yeah.
So I think what you're saying is that logos, branding, packaging, those are all really important. What, like in a nutshell, I think people get confused about their logo versus their brand. Can you kind of explain what the difference is between those two things?
Yeah. So I always say that branding comes first. And this is a huge mistake that I often see. People design a logo and they think that is the first step of building a brand, or like you said, that is their brand. And this is not true. Your branding always comes before your logo. So your brand is your business personality. I always say it's the promise that you make to your customers. So there's a lot that goes into your brand. It's identifying who's buying your product, what problems you're solving for them, why they choose your product over another, what you stand for. And then of course it includes those visual components like your colors and fonts, which go into making your logo. But you have to really think through all of your brand identity before you can make a logo that resonates with your biggest fans.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. So do you have in your business, in your Retail Ready business or your consulting, do you have sort of a flow that you go through with people to kind of figure out what their brand is before you even tackle packaging and logos and things?
Yeah, absolutely. So Justine knows this. The first step is figuring out who is your target audience.
Gotcha.
So who connects with your brand more than anybody else? Who is your biggest fan and why do they love your brand? Why do they love your
ideal
product?
Customer idea?
Yeah, exactly. The ideal customer. Once you have that dialed in, you can make your branding, your marketing, and your business decisions speak to that person, that like specific person, rather than generically speaking to everyone.
Well, so on that point, should food makers be looking at what retail outlets they go into? So is the idea to be as widely distributed as possible, or should you be careful to put your brand, your product only into places where your ideal customer would shop? Yeah,
absolutely. And it's a little bit of a tough challenge because the impulse is that you want to be in as many locations as possible, right? More opportunity to get in place or in front of your customers. However, if you're in brick and mortar locations where your ideal customers aren't shopping, it's a waste of time.
Gotcha.
So making sure that when you choose retail locations to partner with, you are choosing locations that have a very similar target audience as you do.
Yeah, that makes sense, because I almost think I mean, I'll shop in certain places, and if I look at if someone brings a product home and says, "Oh, look what I got at Walmart," I'm like, "Ugh, my boutique-y food product is at Walmart." Maybe I don't like them as much as I thought.
I was just going to say that, and I would have to make those decisions as a buyer too. I would have potential new products pitch me, and they would say, look at all the success we've had. We are sold at Cost Plus World Market. We are sold at Target. We have all of these accounts. And I would say, frankly, not interested. That is great. And I am so happy for you and your brand, but that is not the same. That's not the same consumer that we have.
That kind of happens to us with our farmers markets, actually. We'll get applicants in that'll say, I'm also available on Amazon, and I'm at Jimbo's, and I'm at Whole Foods, and I'm here and here and here. And I feel like, our space in the farmers markets is really more for people that have got that one-to-one relationship as opposed to such a broad distribution that why would you come to the farmers market to get it?
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
I just want to say one thing. When I took Retail Ready, it was so fun because Alli made us do this whole find out who your target audience is. She made us go as far as giving them a name and giving them a personality. And she had us choose, I actually creepily chose a picture of my friend.
Well, somebody you understand.
Yeah. But she made us find an image of them and share it with the group. So it was so fun to read cool. These it was almost like playing D&D or something. You're writing these stories, these narratives. And it was such an interesting exercise to go through because you really have to think who is this person that I want to buy my items? And it makes you kind of reconsider a lot of just the ways that you position your brand. And
sure.
So,
and in choosing stores, that would also be something that would be applicable to going out to various farmers markets and seeing, are the people in this neighborhood at this market, are those the folks that I relate to?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I always love putting a name with a target audience because then as you're making business decisions, you can say, would this resonate with Susan? Would this resonate with Jim? Would Jim like this new packaging? Would Jim like it if I were sold at Walmart?
Bob would never shop here.
Exactly. Bob doesn't even know what this store is. And so I actually I told you this, right? I made a workbook for folks who are listening to this podcast that will help walk through this process. It's really fun. It's
cool.
Mad Libs style.
Where
you can fill in about your target audience and just take 10 minutes to think about that ideal person for your brand. I'll post that to my website later and we'll get that going for your audience.
Great.
It's so helpful. So, Alli, you've been around for a long time, both as a buyer and a consultant, and you've worked with lots of different companies that have been around for a while and are looking to rebrand, but then also kind of startups that are beginning from scratch. What is the biggest mistake that you see food makers make when branding their products, or the most common?
Yeah, two things. One, I guess three things. No, four things, 5 things.
25 things.
I know, all the things. The first one really is that target audience. And it seems so simple, but it's such a simple exercise to do and makes a world of difference in mapping out your business growth. So I almost always see that mistake, not having a really dialed in target audience. But beyond that, there are a few other things. One, going back to the branding, is most often it is a bad idea to have your friend or a family member design your branding for you. I see this all the time, and it is it is a great way to save money, but at the end of the day, it is almost always worth it to pay for someone who is a full-on branding agency who can do packaging design for you, who goes through that whole brand identity work for you and then translates it to a package. Maybe even a website or e-commerce site.
But my granddaughter is such a good artist.
Exactly.
Mom does not like her art.
She loves my product.
Right.
Exactly. And then the third mistake that I so often see, so often hear, is people who think that they will make money once they scale, and aren't so concerned about making money off every single sale, or even breaking even off every single sale in the beginning, and naively think that when they start buying in larger quantities, they will make more money in their business. And that simply doesn't happen. It is a really, really deep hole to dig yourself out of if you aren't making money, with every sale starting at the beginning of your business. So that's one of the things that is the biggest challenge and I recognize it as a huge challenge, but, naively thinking that, once you can buy those pine nuts by the pallet, you're going to be raking in the dough. It doesn't happen like that.
Yeah, I think that making money from the first thing ties right in with, we've been having this talk about all the people that start and never put their own labor into their business plan, and then all of a sudden they scale they go to contract packaging or they hire employees, and those folks aren't going to work for free, and it's sort of a sudden realization, oh wow, I haven't really costed this product correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other challenges that I see with financials is that folks often forget to calculate a retail margin into their product from the beginning. So when they have success at the farmer's market and they're ready to move into a wholesale relationship, there's no room left in their pricing to offer it to that wholesale buyer at an appropriate price.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
And I think that's something that, luckily for us, we did that work ahead of time to figure out, hey, we want to be in retail and we also want to be in farmers markets. But that's something that I think that new farmers market vendors who see themselves down the line wanting to be in retail also to think about, because if my hot sauce is carried in like a shop down the street and I'm selling our hot sauce for $10 at the farmer's market, but then the shop down the street has to sell it for $15 to make a profit, it's just not going to work locally.
No, it's going to look weird. I had an applicant just recently that said, I'm already in stores, but I'm going to sell it cheaper at the farmer's market. And I said, have you told your store clients that? Because they're not going to love that.
They know.
No, they won't.
No.
You've helped a lot of businesses in rocking farmers markets and also trade shows. And you also have a really strong background in merchandising. Part of what I loved in your Retail Ready course is how you talked about how certain packages look great at farmers markets, but then they look different on the shelves, and how some types of packaging are just difficult to merchandise for whatever reason. But could you give us just some display tips or things that you've learned as a merchandiser of maybe different packaging or the way to stack things that catch your eye?
Yeah, I could talk about merchandising all day long. I love thinking about display building. And the biggest thing is making sure that your display has that it feels abundant, that it feels really bountiful. No one wants to think that they are buying leftovers of a product or the very last of something. So making sure that you build your display that has height and depth and this really overwhelming sense of bounty will really go far in making sure that people are attracted to your display. So there are a couple things. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that's also really interesting because I feel, especially in the Bay Area right now, there's so much minimalist or minimalism.
Yeah.
And you walk into a coffee shop and it's all white tile. And there's one thing.
jar or something.
Yeah.
Don't get me started on that. I feel so inclined to just leave them an anonymous tip being like, as a former buyer, let me tell you what you could do to improve your space. But yeah, that idea of abundance, no one wants to think that they're buying, that they're taking the last of something. And so there's a couple things that you can do, especially for people who sell, produce, or I know a couple of people who sell proteins at the farmer's market. Of course you don't want to bring so much product that you have waste, but you do want to bring enough that it feels really full. And so you can do things like fake stacking your apple crate. You stuff it with newspapers or that floral foam stuff, and you just put your produce on top, or you really bulk up your displays with ice or like filler to make things look more bountiful.
Yeah.
I used to always take old cardboard boxes at Bi-Rite, and I would wrap them in branded butcher paper to make risers and props and things like that. So it felt like it still had the Bi-Rite brand. It was still branded, but it wasn't just overflowing with product that would go to waste.
Yeah.
So there are little tricks and tools that you can use, but above all, making sure that it feels really, really full. So that's one for display. And two for displays is making sure that the prices are really, really clear to your shoppers. The number one reason why people don't buy is because they don't know the price of something. Because, we aren't really accustomed to talking about money and pricing with people. It's not something that we're comfortable with. And so if you put your shopper in a position where they have to ask you for the price, and then in front of you, the producer, they have to make a decision on whether or not they think your product is worth that price, it becomes really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Going back to that shrub example, say they don't understand how much your shrub is, and they get up the nerve to ask you about it, and you tell them that it is $19.99. All of a sudden in front of you, they have to be like, oh, shoot. Do I want to spend $20 on this shrub? Am I even going to enjoy it? Is it worth it? And that's not really something that people want to do in front of you.
Yeah, and I think sometimes you intimidate them into they'll buy it because they don't want to admit that they can't afford it or look like they're cheap. But then they'll never come back because they've been humiliated. And so that's not a good experience that they've had.
I also read this study about farmers markets specifically where the researcher had asked a bunch of people, it surveyed a bunch of farmers market shoppers, and they found that people, when prices weren't posted, they assumed that things were way more expensive than they really were because of this perception of farmers markets being more expensive than grocery stores. And so people didn't buy things because they thought that they costed, or that the price was way higher than it actually is.
Like looking at a menu with no prices on it, you just assume it's really expensive.
I can't afford this.
Yeah, exactly. I'm definitely a shopper like that. Like if I don't see the price, I will hardly ever ask. It just makes me feel uncomfortable. And so, I might pass up on a really good product just because you don't have the price out. So it's just
really good advice.
Yeah, don't make it difficult for your customers.
And the pricing needs to be really clear too, and making sure that price is, directly in front of the product, and realizing that, I always use the example of elephant heart plums. And I remember so distinctly years ago going to a farmer's market and seeing a sign that said elephant hearts, $6.99 a pound or whatever it was. And being like, what are elephant hearts? Like, I don't know what that person is selling. And it was on like a chalkboard or something, not directly in front of the plums. And I remember it was such a great lesson for me to be like, oh, well, one, don't assume everyone knows what your product is. Don't use the nickname. Don't use the wacky varietal name, and make sure that it's literally next to the product. Like everything should have a tiny little price tag, ideally laminated or on a chalkboard or, something that feels professional. With really great handwriting in front of every single product.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Those are really good helpful tips.
Yeah, those are really good. Pass those along. So you stay really busy. Can you also tell us a little bit about what you do at the Good Food Awards?
Yeah, absolutely.
We like to talk about that.
I'm in full swing with the Good Food Awards right now. So they are a nonprofit organization here in San Francisco. They've been around for 9 years.
Wow.
And their organization supports and recognizes both really tasty and sustainably made American food products. So they have, as of now, so they add a category every year, but this year we have 16 categories. So the categories are things like charcuterie, coffee, oils, confections, and products are entered from every single state across America and judged in a blind tasting weekend in September. So it's really cool. So we have over 2,000 entries that apply every single year. All the samples are shipped to a big warehouse here in San Francisco. And in one day, we have over 300 judges who blind taste through all the products. We award or we give numerical scores to each of the products. And if you are in the top 10 in your category, then the Good Food Awards does a really deep dive into the sustainability of your production. So literally like tracing every single ingredient in your product.
Wow.
And then, it's really wild, especially because it's a really small staff. So they spend, all of October and most of November doing that traceability, that vetting, and then they award finalists and semifinalists in January at an award ceremony. So for the past 4 years, I've been in a volunteer position. I was the head of the pantry category. So it was really fun. With a co-chair, I determined the sustainability requirements in pantry, figured out how we were going to do that blind tasting weekend, how we were going to, judge over 250 diverse products in that one day, which was just wild. And then this past year, I started working with them in a fuller capacity. And my job now is to organize those 32 volunteer chairs who facilitate that blind tasting day.
Wow. So what, any particular product that you found especially daunting to taste? I've got some friends here in San Diego who have been judges. And I remember when Donna McLaughlin had cheese one year and she said, I know it sounds like fun to taste thousands of samples of cheese. She goes, but it's a little rough actually at the end of the day.
Yeah. It's so funny because everyone thinks that their category is either particularly challenging or particularly, I guess I think it's particularly fun before they actually get to do it. And then they're like, oh shit, why did I volunteer to taste, charcuterie all day, pickles all day,
hot sauce all day.
Hot sauce. Yeah. I mean, anything that you taste, all day long becomes a burden. I guess I should say a disclaimer. It's also a very fun day. Not that I want to turn away judges. But so I think the two categories that end up being the easiest on the palate are pantry because it is so diverse, where you can taste a really fantastic nut butter and then a sambal and then a hot sauce and then a vinegar.
All in one variety.
Flight.
Yeah.
So you don't get so much palate fatigue. But then the new category, snacks, is going to be a lot of fun to taste this year. And that's also for similar reasons because it is quite diverse.
Yeah, that sounds like fun.
Yeah, I'd like to sign up to judge snacks.
I personally like, exactly. I personally like the cider category. That's a really fun one. Yeah.
I know we've had judges from here that really liked the craft beer category. I'm just wondering how discriminating a decision you can make about halfway through that tasting session.
Like, it tastes great.
This is awesome. This is so good.
Certainly for the alcohol ones, they're always spitting. So they're not influenced by inebriation. But palate fatigue is, it's a real thing. So we have to design the day to have lots of palate cleansers, and certainly lots of breaks throughout the day as well.
Yeah, take a little nap.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's so fun.
Yeah, that sounds like so much fun, and we love the Good Food Awards. And one day I will go, and it will be so wonderful. But we have some vendors who participated, and it just sounds like such a great aspect of the food world here.
When I was a buyer, in my last year of buying, the Good Food Awards rolled out the Good Food Mercantile, which they tagged as the unfancy food show. And it was such a pleasant experience. They still do it now, but it's a trade show the same weekend as Fancy Food, both in San Francisco and in New York. And then they have a traveling one every year. And I swear, once I went to that Good Food Mercantile, I was like, I am never going to Expo West. I am never going to Fancy Food again. For my market, for Bi-Rite, the products that I wanted to bring onto the shelf were much more aligned with the Good Food Awards
Interesting.
than fancy food.
Yeah, good to know.
I like
it
that
seems a bit more like down to earth in terms of, and just like smaller and
Yeah, because that's still a real people kind of aspect as opposed to the really, really big brands that.
And to show there, you have to pass their sustainability vetting.
I love that
So
part,
so as a buyer, I could walk the floor in confidence, knowing that those products were aligned with my sourcing values, which was such a relief. At fancy food, you could find something that you really, really loved, only to realize that it was backed by a corporation that you didn't admire, or used ingredients that you didn't agree with, or whatever it was.
Yeah, big time saver for buyers from discriminating stores.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So much fun. Well, we've really enjoyed talking to you. I feel like we could talk to you forever about so many different things. But we're going to kind of start to wrap up here, but we always do like an ending question at the end of our interviews that pertain to our guest. So our question for this week's podcast episode is, what emerging food trend do you see in farmers markets that you're excited about? Or what food trend do you feel has peaked? We were going to say, would you like to see end? But we felt like saying what trend you do think has peaked is a little bit nicer way to say it. So either one of those.
Yeah, the ones we have are okay, but we have enough.
Yeah, we have enough now. So we're all going to kind of answer the question. So I'll start with us here so you can have a minute to think about it. But Kat, do you want to go ahead and start with your answer?
Sure. Yeah. Dips has always been a really saturated category. We've always had a ton of hummus and tzatziki and baba ganoush and the standard dips. You see an awful lot of those at farmers markets. And so it seems like just the last year and a half, what I've seen is a bunch of people trying to stay in that category, but like riff off a little bit. So we've got Vivo Tribe that's doing bean dips that instead of chickpeas, they use, they've got a black bean dip and they've got a miso chickpea dip with ginger in it. And so it's not your standard hummus. And then we've got bitchin' sauce that's been huge here. That's an almond-based hummus. So it's ground almonds instead of chickpeas. And that appeals to a different group of people and doesn't have any dairy in it. And there's all that. We do have an application in now, and this is where I think we've peaked. We've got an application in now from some folks that want to sell sweet hummus. They're in little 4-ounce tubs with foil, so you can take them with you everywhere and eat them. And it's like chocolate hummus and coconut hummus. And I think maybe the time has not yet come.
Yeah,
I think maybe we need to take a little break from the alternate dips. I don't know.
They're trying to fit into that category.
That's
I think,
right.
But
maybe they should be
out
in a different spot altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, I know my category that I'm excited about is we're seeing a lot at our markets here is alternate milks. So it's really hard for our markets here to sell any kind of dairy. I don't know why, but Southern California Health Department hates dairy products. So we have imported cheeses and such, but we don't have farmers like making their own cheese and selling it. We don't have a lot of milk at the markets, like next to none. So it's nice to see alternate milks. And I'm especially excited because it started kind of with almond milks, which is so great and people are into that. But I have a tree nut allergy. And so it's depressing because I can't drink any of those almond milks. But now we have people doing things like oat milk, some rice milks, and then a new thing that one of our vendors told me she's going to start doing is pea milk. And she's like PEA milk.
Yeah, I just heard that pea milk.
Pea milk, and someone told me they didn't know. I know.
New name.
So
That's why I always spell it when I'm like PEA. And I haven't tried it yet.
Legume milk.
Yeah, legume milk. Sweet pea milk. I don't know. No, that does not better, maybe. But it's a nice alternative. And someone else had some from another brand and said it was really good. So I'm excited to try that. But I think if we can't have regular dairy milk at the market.
And just a lot of people are sensitive to dairy, they're finding, and they're trying to avoid dairy, so it makes it so much sense. And our vegan shoppers
are really excited about that, but then, they love the almond and the cashew milks, but other milk alternatives are popping up, which is something I'm really jazzed about.
Cool.
So, just seeing what you think.
Okay, mine, a couple months ago, I probably told you, was complaining about this in the office, but I went on this, crazy cleanse where I couldn't eat any grains, and it was really, really hard.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing a trend in grain-free things, or granola that doesn't use grains.
The whole paleo thing.
Yeah,
that's part of that.
Yeah, I'm not into the whole paleo thing, but I think that finding options without grains is really cool. So grain-free granola, or using ancient grains, quinoa, and and millet and other types of grains to replace the ones we're used to.
Yeah, I like it. Alli, what are you excited about, and or what do you feel has peaked in the food trends?
I feel like I can't answer the question that says what I need to go away because someone's going to get mad at me.
That's kind of how I felt. Yeah,
You're
when we
gonna
first
do
said
that
what one should
by
end, and I
email.
said, I don't know what I can say that's not going to offend 3 of my vendors.
Yeah, exactly.
can talk over
because I think
drinks about that.
there's always room for innovation, right?
Sure, yeah.
So I'm gonna even granola, right? Like I could say granola category is saturated. Then all of a sudden, Nana Joe's here in San Francisco comes out with an amazing chef collaboration granola or a grain-free granola that totally spins, my perception of the granola category again. So you're right, Justine. That was a good one. All those grain-free things. But in terms of trends, there are 2 things trending that I like. The first one I'll say is I love seeing all of these health and wellness focused products like functional beverages with adaptogens and incorporating herbs and mushrooms and things like that, like for somatic stuff, does so well. I love seeing that. I don't know. I imagine down in Southern California, that is just a huge booming business.
It is.
I'm curious. If you guys if you feel like it might be oversaturated at this point.
I think it's still emerging.
It's really needed. It's really popular. So I think, it's still chugging along.
Yeah. I love seeing brands that feel like they're doing that authentically rather than just jumping on the health and wellness bandwagon.
Yeah,
definitely.
So I really like that. And then the other thing that I'm seeing more and more is for-profit companies that are becoming certified B Corp, which is really, really rad. So you guys are familiar with B Corp?
I am familiar with it. I was just reading. There's a big article in Inc., and it's actually a lot more complicated than you think. You have to do a ton of work to get certified.
I'm not really clear on what that is either. So
so certified B Corp. It is a worldwide thing that spans multiple industries, many industries, and they're all working together towards one goal, which is to redefine success in business. So really shifting and putting people before profits. So when you become a certified B Corp business, you go through a really rigorous vetting process that essentially says we are taking care of our people, our employees. We're taking care of our people throughout our supply chain and putting that before profits in building our business. So I think we'll see it emerge more and more. There's over 2,000 certified B Corp companies across the globe now. And I think we'll see it become almost as the next way of organic or non-GMO certification, which is pretty cool.
I love
that's
that.
exciting.
Cool.
Yeah. So now we're seeing more and more food businesses that are certified B Corp.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Natural transition.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, Alli, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. And we're so excited to invite you to join us at Intense 2019.
Oh my God.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's
Next
going to be
February. I can't wait.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you.
Yeah, I'm delighted to join. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think that this podcast especially is so useful. And Kat and I teach a Vendor 101 class every month here in San Diego for people who want to get started in farmers markets. So we go over like specific permitting to San Diego County, but we also just talk about a lot of the things that you spoke about, merchandising and how to be in your booth and the personality sells and everything. So I think I'm going to take some clips and play it during the class.
I feel so validated.
Yeah, I feel so validated right now.
You couldn't
like,
see Kat, but she was like forcefully nodding along to everything you were saying, just like fist pounding.
Fist pumping. We're like, yes.
Yes. I love it. I love that
We tell students that all the time, but then we're like, is anyone else saying this?
Right.
Apparently.
Yes. We have another expert.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
Backup.
Expert verified.
Yes,
right.
absolutely.
Awesome. And we'll link your workbook into our podcast information and on our blog, and we'll share it on our newsletter too for our listeners.
Yeah, thanks for doing that. It's so awesome.
Sweet. Yeah, it's such a fun exercise. And like I said, if you're listening, take the 10 minutes to do it because it will make such a big difference in your business.
Yeah, absolutely. What a nice tool. All right, thanks so much,
Well,
Alli.
thank you so
Talking to you.
much,
Can't
Alli.
wait to meet you in February.
Yeah, we'll see you in February.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening. Please leave us a review on iTunes and tell us how you liked this week's episode. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss the next one. The 2019 Intense Conference will be held in San Diego, California, February 24th through 26th. We hope you'll join us. The Early Bird Threes Company All Access Pass deal is still available until September 1st. If you buy 2 tickets, you get 1 free, so you can bring your whole crew to the conference. And if you want more farmers market tips, you can subscribe to our weekly newsletter at intensebusiness.com or follow us on Instagram at intensebusiness. Also, you can access Alli Ball's target audience worksheet by visiting www.alliball.com/tent talk. We'll also add a link to our blog at intenseconference.com. This podcast is produced by Intense Business, where passion meets profit. Today's episode was recorded and edited by Justine Marzoni-Mead. Original music by David Mead. Special thanks to our guest Alli Ball and San Diego Markets.